I'd like you to imagine your dream life. See the version of you who has what you want to have, feels how you want to feel, and is who you want to be. I'm Brittany Hoopes, your hypnotherapist and manifestation coach, and this is the show where I'll teach you to master the full power of your mind, to guide you on your journey towards destination manifestation.
Take a step back for the ones who can't do that. Hope I separate from my past.
You're listening to Destination Manifestation, where I help you align your mind so that you can manifest your dreams. My name is Brittany Hoopes. Hi guys, how are you doing? Okay, I just want to let you know I spared you a new feature here that is on this recording platform that I'm using. I record my episodes on Riverside, and they just had where I could do fun virtual backgrounds. Like, you know how Zoom does where you have backgrounds? So I can make it look like I'm in a podcasting studio, but I'm not. And I will admit, I played around with those features a little bit, but I don't think that it makes my podcast look any better. So you're just getting my normal, boring white wall if you're watching the video version of the show. I do want to say, if you're already subscribed to the show, that must mean that you're familiar with this boring white wall. And I thank you so much. I have to say this. I've been getting somewhat sentimental because I've had the realization recently that I've been studying manifestation for 16 freaking years now. Isn't that nuts? Like, in 2 more years, I will have studied manifestation as long as I didn't study it, like including like being a baby. Like, isn't that nuts? So right now I'm 18 years not studying it, 16 years having studied it. Like, how crazy is that? That's hundreds of books. That is thousands of hours of study and certification. That is so many journals, so many manifestations, thousands of sessions with clients. Once I went pro, right? As a hypnotherapist and coach. And yet, if I could manifest it all again, I'd do it completely differently. Now, that doesn't mean I regret my journey, okay? I know it was exactly what I needed at the time to get me to the place that I am today and where I'm going to continue to go. My journey is far from over, right? Thank God I can now apply what I know to my future manifestations. And I'm sure I'll be doing an episode, 10 years from now where I'm laughing at what I'm going to say in this one. Okay. But from a manifestation point of view, there is so much that I know now that would have been pure gold had I known it and applied it years ago. I can look back and see that now. I'm sure you have instances in your life where you can see that too, right? And that's what I want. That gold is the topic of this episode today. That's what I want you to have. I want to hand you the gold bars of manifestation knowledge and experience from the past 16 years that you can apply now so that you can shave off years, I'd say even decades, off your manifestations. Sound good? Let's do that, okay? Because I know it can be so tempting to look at the clock of time, especially when we have the pandemic back in 2020, right? So many of us feel like there's this gap of time that happened, and yet there's very little life or manifestations to account for that gap of time. Like, I feel this way when I think about, like, oh my gosh, this December, I'm going to turn 35. And I'm like, what the heck? I just turned 30. I turned 30 years old 4 months before the pandemic started. Okay. And so then it was like, boom, shut down your 30s. And then 2 years later, Big Brother took over my life for like a good portion of when I was 32. And so over the past 5 years, it just really feels like a blur. And so have you ever felt that way? I know how important it feels to not waste time. Although I will say time is relative when it comes to our manifestations anyways, okay? That's like a whole other conversation. But we are physical beings on a physical plane, and we want to feel like our manifestations are something we can experience in our physical 3D reality sooner rather than later. We crave that feeling. So today's episode is for you, and I would even say it's for you and it's for my past self. It's for 18-year-old Brittany, who just discovered and read the book The Secret, and whose mind was literally blown and wanted to apply these principles, but really had no clue at the time how to do it. I remember feeling that way. If she would have known what I know now, she could have manifested everything I have now and then some way sooner than it took me in real life. But guess what? That gets to be you now. Okay, so no matter where you are on your manifestation journey, I know there's going to be something valuable for you in today's episode that you can apply to your manifestations right now. Now, I'm not going to bore you with how I discovered manifestation. I kind of just mentioned it here anyways, right? And if you want the long story of it, I do describe my manifestation journey in detail back in episode 1 of this podcast. So feel free to go back and listen to that if it interests you any at all, right? But basically, just like I said, I was a freshman at NYU. I read The Secret and my mind was officially blown. And then I just kind of started to go down the rabbit hole, reading the next book and the next book and applying these things and doing exercises and really applying anything I read or I listened or I learned at a conference or whatever it might be. When we first start out as manifestors, like me back in college, in my dorm room reading The Secret, you might learn about manifestation and be like, oh my gosh, life just makes sense now that I know this. I've done this. I just didn't know I was doing it. That's how I felt when I first learned about, the law of attraction and manifestation. And why we feel that way is because we all manifest, whether we're aware of it or not. It's a universal law that's always at play. It's like, imagine if you didn't know about gravity and then you learned about gravity and you're like, oh, I've fallen off my bed before. Makes sense why I fell. Like now you know that gravity was at play. That's how manifestation is too. But now, once you piqued your interest as that beginner manifester, you want to begin to learn how to do that manifestation on purpose. So that's when the study comes in. But the studying is also our messy middle. We might apply this learning and we might fail as we do it. So I want to scoop out those lessons from the mud and just dust them off, clean them off for you here when I think back on my messy middle so far. And I will say this, I'm still very much in the messy middle. I don't know if I'll ever know when I'm not in the messy middle because I don't think I'll ever know when I'm a master at manifesting. I guess right before the moment I die, I might give myself that credit because there's always something to learn and there's always a new way to understand it. I will say this, I've trudged through quite a bit of mud for it to be useful. At least I've gotten that far. So here are some of the top lessons I found in the mud over these past 16 years. Okay. Now I will say this, there are millions of lessons, many of which I share on this podcast quite freely, but I'm going to focus on the top ones here for now. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a car on a road trip with a child? Okay. Maybe you're driving to, let's pick a fun place like Walt Disney World or somewhere else fun. Okay. And that sweet, pure little child is so excited. That child also has zero sense of time. Okay. Because time is actually something that we learn. Isn't that interesting? Like a little kid doesn't really know the difference between 5 minutes and 60 minutes, right? Those are just words to them. They're just concepts. They don't really know what they feel like. So we learn time, which is interesting to realize from a manifestation point of view, that time is not just natural. It's a construct. So that little kid who's so excited to go where we're going asks the age-old road trip question. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Hey, are we there yet? Right? We've either been that kid or we've been in a car with that kid, right? And they ask it so much that you just kind of want to rip your hair out. And this question is a big old muddy middle trap when it comes to manifestation. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And definitely it's a trap that I've fallen into many times over the past 16 years, okay? Because here's why it's a trap. When you ask, where is my manifestation? The universe manifests what you're thinking, which is, in that case, more looking and more seeking for your manifestation. So it perpetuates the looking. Now imagine each time, it's kind of like this. Imagine each time that little kid asked, are we there yet? It added 10 more miles onto the trip. Okay. And so this trip got longer and longer, which then in turn made the kid ask, are we there yet? More and more and more often, which added more and more and more miles. You can see how you could easily get stuck in this never ending loop of waiting and wishing and wanting and looking and seeking. So let's just break that loop here. Okay. How do we break it? We have to focus on what we want instead. So if you're asking, where is my manifestation? Answer that question. And there's only one right answer if you want to manifest it. It's here. It's real. It's mine. It's in the quantum field of possibility, because that's the doggone truth. Once you ask, it is given. We are just moving it from a state of energy into a state of 3D physical matter. That's all we're doing. We're taking the thing that exists and moving it from energy to matter, from quantum possibility to something that is perceptible to your 5 senses within your physical reality. Let me give you an example. So right now, my husband is currently out of the house. He is out running some errands. He's running to Home Depot. Then he's going to go pick us up some dinner, which I'm very thankful for. I love him. He's out running those errands. And I don't think twice about it, okay? Like, he just is. I send him on his way, give him a kiss, and then I get back to what I'm doing. I know that's what he's doing. I don't question if that's what he really is doing right now, because we have an amazing relationship and I have zero reason to distrust him. Literally, I trust him with my life. I don't doubt him, okay? Now, here's the thing. If I did trust him, and he's like, I'm going to go run errands. This is what I'm imagining cheaters sound like. They're like, I'm going to go run errands. And then I'd be like, is that where he really is? And maybe I'd track his phone, or I'd track his car, or I'd interrogate him when he'd come home. Maybe give him a sniff or two. See if he smells like woman. And I'd think, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? And I'd only be asking that question if I didn't trust him. Right? There's no reason to ask it if you trust. I'm making a joke out of this because that's what you're doing with your manifestations when you question them. You aren't trusting them or the universe. You aren't trusting yourself. And you can imagine that if I was constantly questioning my sweet husband over where he was at any given hour when he really wasn't cheating on me, that would get really old really quick. Like, I can imagine if somebody was constantly interrogating me and I wasn't doing anything, I'd be like, what the heck? Like, what did I do to deserve this? Right? And so my husband probably would want to spend less time with me and be less invested in our relationship if I was constantly doubting him for no reason. He'd kind of pull away, I would imagine. The energy of distrust is very off-putting. Okay? And that my husband, in this mythical, like, made up case, might think, should I not be here? Is there something I'm not aware of? Like, why does she think I shouldn't be here? Like, I could see him trying to question. Trust draws things to you, and distrust, especially unwarranted distrust. Now, there might be some instances where you're with a cheater and you should distrust them. I'm not saying trust everyone blindly, but trust is earned and trust is shown. And it's more like the unwarranted distrust that I'm talking about here. Unwarranted distrust pushes things away. Now, we don't do this on purpose most of the time. That's what I find with manifestations. But I want you to find a way to trust your manifestations. Trust the inevitability of them so that you signal to them that you believe in them. The universe is not cheating on you. Now, you might think that micromanaging your manifestations shows that you really care, but it actually does the opposite. It has the opposite effect, because if you trusted and believed your manifestations, you'd let them be. You'd still take action, of course, but you wouldn't need to see it this very instant to know that it's still true. Just because it's not here in this very singular, made up, constructed moment in time doesn't mean that it's not true. It just means it's energy. It doesn't matter. You wouldn't have to dictate every single detail. You just would allow it to be. Or as Abraham Hicks says, one of my favorite teachers, it's a co-creation. You are God and God is you. You and the universe are tangoing. You're dancing, right? It's not a solo dance. You're not like Napoleon Dynamite or something, right? Like it's co-creation. It's collaboration. It's not only you and it's not only the universe either. It's you working together with the universe. So don't be the girl who takes over the group project. I was that girl during school. And sometimes in this messy middle, I've been that girl with my manifestations and it just pushes it away. It's not going to lead to an A. It might be kind of like your parents growing up. Maybe they wouldn't let you drive the car or they tried to do everything for you. And at a certain point, you just kind of go like, back off. I remember once, my dad's going to be mad at me for sharing this story, but I remember once I came home from college and my dad took my plate at it was either at a restaurant or it was at home. Maybe it was at home. And he literally took my plate and started cutting up my food for me. And I was like, I am 18 years old at college. Like, I can do this myself. What are you doing? Back off. Let me do it. Don't you trust me? Like, don't you believe that I am skilled enough to take care of myself? I'm freaking living in New York alone. Like, I can do this. And oftentimes it comes from a very loving place, right? Of course, sweetie, I trust you. I just want to make sure blah, 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 right? They don't want you to fail. Your parents don't want you to fail. And so they think that they're helping. But when they micromanage you and breathe down your back, you end up performing worse. Whereas if this person just trusted you and just let you be, you would have done a far better job. Now, will you have made some mistakes? Absolutely. Will you have learned the most through those mistakes? Absolutely. So trust your manifestations. If you love your manifestations, trust them. Because to love is to trust, and to trust is to love. So let's just take this idea even further, okay? Let's say you haven't been trusted all that much. I say this and you're like, ooh, Brittany, you're calling me out, okay? In fact, you've been distrusting your manifestations for a while now, until it's kind of become a habit. Your distrust is pushing that manifestation away from you, which is bolstering your distrust. And you find yourself kind of in this vicious cycle again, just like the kid wondering if they're there yet. You're going to have to find a way to break that cycle. And in my experience, breaking the cycle, especially when distrust in your manifestation has been going on for a while, on the surface, breaking that cycle looks and feels a whole lot like giving up. And that can be terrifying for a go-getting, ambitious person like you. But here's the golden distinction. It's not giving up on your manifestation. What it is giving up on is giving up control of your manifestation. Do you feel that difference? It's letting go and it's letting God. It's saying, I am so freaking tired of trying and willing myself to manifest this thing that I'm just going to give myself a break. I am not going to micromanage the universe anymore because it stresses me out and I'm done feeling stressed about this. Have you ever had a manifestation that you've wanted so much and it just seems like no matter what you do, it isn't happening or isn't coming or isn't this, and you just are like, I'm done. This is exhausting for me. And so you give up the reins. And the beauty with this tactic is that even if you don't immediately manifest the thing that you want, you, at the very end of the day, feel way better. You've eased all the stress that you had been putting on yourself to manifest that thing. And so technically, even automatically, you win. Even if it's just your mental health that's winning. But here's the thing, by removing that self-inflicted layer of pressure that you had been putting on yourself and improving your own stress levels and your own mental health, you're actually inadvertently going back into a state of alignment, which allows that manifestation to swoop on in, right? It's such a catch-22. Like when we think about it this way, you gotta let go. It's the holding on. It's the pressure. It's the wanting and wishing and willing it. That is keeping it separate from you. And letting go, I will tell you folks, it is so hard. It might feel like you don't care or that you stop believing in yourself, but really it's just letting go of pulling that door handle so tight and shut. That's what it ultimately is like. It's like you're pulling on a door handle, being like, I want it to come in, I want it to come in, I want it to come in, but you're holding the door shut. And so when you let go and you say, I'm no longer going to say, I want it to come in. That's you letting go. And now the thing can come in through the door because you're not holding it shut anymore. Your manifestations can open the door and come on in now that you've stopped pulling it closed. Here's another lesson from the trenches, okay? Another lesson from the mud. Let's say that you want to manifest something and it doesn't turn out the way you expected. In fact, it might even appear that you failed. You didn't manifest the thing that you wanted. Now, if you just observe that, if you just recognized it for what it was and realized that it's all part of a greater plan that just might not be visible to you, that'd be great. But we don't oftentimes react this way, and this is the muddy lesson. Don't make a perceived failure mean something about you. Meaning, don't take the failure personally. If you're doing this, you're making that failure mean that you are a failure. I remember I felt this way when I auditioned to be in one of the biggest school musical shows during my time at NYU. It was called I can't even remember what it was called. It was something like a reality show, which is kind of funny because I ended up being on an actual reality show. But this was like the big NYU reality show. It was like, oh, you get to perform it for the incoming freshmen. And it was like, I don't know. At the time, everyone really wanted to be in it. And I didn't even get a call back. And I thought at the time that it meant that I was like a bad actor and that I was not meant for success. And like, if I couldn't even get a role in college, how in the world was I going to get a role out in the real world? And that universal outcome, right, of me not getting this show that I wanted so bad, I took it so personally and I felt less than because of it. Even though looking back at it now, I've had more hours on network television than 98% of the people who were in that show. Okay? Which is kind of hilarious. Granted, I was not acting while I was on TV, but still, at this point, a lot of them I think would take anything, right? If your car doesn't start one day, does that mean you're a bad person? Even if the reason was that you forgot to put fuel in it? No. It doesn't have anything to do with you as a person. It's mechanical, right? And that's how the universe is too. It's mechanical. Quantum physics, quantum mechanics. We literally call it mechanics, right? It operates by physical laws that apply to everyone and everything. And I think where we get tripped up is because like there's so much language like God from the Old Testament that's like, you are a sinner and you are not. You go to hell and you go to heaven. And it's just like, oh my God, why did they have to write that? That trips everyone up and it's just not true. Manifestation does not operate by moral failings. Because here's the truth. Evil people can manifest good things. And good people, if not careful, can manifest awful things. First of all, who's to determine what is good and what is awful anyways? The universe just is. The principles just are. Plus, you know why you can't make judgments on the manifestation? Because you don't know the full picture yet. I mean, think about the example that I always give. And thank God I lived it so that I can remind myself of this example. I applied for Big Brother 7 times and got on the show my 7th try. You would think after 6 times of hearing nothing, only once did I actually get a real no, okay? Only once did I know that anyone in the world actually saw my audition submission, okay? What if the 6th time I would have decided that me as a human being was not worthy of being on such a fine television program? I'm being snarky. Sorry. And what if I decided to count myself out? I would think that was the universe's fault, but really it was all me. The universe had it lined up. I just didn't stick with it. My lack of manifesting Big Brother in that case over the course of 6 years was not due to a moral failing. And you know how I know this? Because on the 7th year, I got on. And I was no different in the 7th year than I was before, right? I was still the same old me. In fact, on the 7th year, I was older and I was not even as cute as I was the earlier years, okay? I weighed 50 pounds more than the first time I applied. So that just goes to show things that you think would hurt you end up being just fine. And yet that was when I got on. I didn't doubt the universe, and therefore I didn't give up. I didn't let the 6 years of nothing mean anything other than I needed to continue. That's all that it meant. Where can you apply this principle and do the same? We don't know the full picture. I had a client once who wanted to manifest a new direction in her business. Okay. She had built this, I think it was a brand of pet food, and it had gotten into some local Whole Foods. Things were going really well. The brand was like taking off, right? It was going well. But she personally was feeling called to change the direction of her business. It really wasn't, she was building it, but it wasn't in the direction that she wanted. She wanted to sell other pet related products, right? Other than food. But she was terrified. I mean, she had spent years and so much money and so much time and so much effort building out that business. What if it all crumbled? If she moved to something different? And that was the thought that she just continually ruminated on. What if it all crumbles? What if it all crumbles? What if it all crumbles? Well, you can imagine. That sounds a lot like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Right? You can start imagining what was happening when we first started working together. Her existing business was crumbling, and it was crumbling fast. And that's why she came to see me, because she was like, oh my gosh, my business is crumbling. I don't want it. And I think about that it's crumbling all the time, and it's crumbling. And I said, well, what did you expect? She felt like she was a failure. And the first things I pointed out to her was, A, this is not a moral failing on your part. It's a thinking mishap. It's simply the misdirection of your thought, your observation, and your focus. So you know how when you're driving and there's a car crash, right? It might be tempting to kind of slow down and look at the car crash. In manifestation, we don't want to do that, because what we give our attention to, we manifest. So don't watch the car crash, even if the car crash is your failing business. Don't look at the crumbling. Instead, focus on the solution, the expansion, especially when you want it to change. And that was the second thing that I pointed out to her. What if this crumbling of your existing business was you manifesting the new direction in your business? And that's why I told her, I said, didn't you tell me that you don't want to sell pet food anymore? Well, it sounds like you're manifesting that just fine. You're not selling it. It's crumbling. Good job. And she laughed, because I think it made sense now why it was happening. I don't think she wanted the business to fail before she had something new set up, but she didn't want that business. And so the universe was saying, here you go. Here's not having the business. It made more sense now why this was happening. And actually, she realized she's quite a great manifester. The problem is that she had this desire for a new direction in her business, but she wasn't pursuing it out of fear. She wanted the old thing to keep working because it was comfortable and it was known, even though she didn't want it. So sometimes the universe will stop other things so that we'll finally say, okay, I hear you. I'm going to go and trust what is in alignment for my real goals. So we had to clear up that fear that kept her more focused on the crumbling of the existing thing as opposed to the growing of the thing she wanted to grow. Which leads me to my third and final most important lesson from the mud. A lot of times you'll hear the metaphor, and I'm guilty of using this in some circumstances too, but the metaphor that you are the author of your own story, okay? And I think that metaphor, for the most part, is a pretty good one. It applies in a lot of instances. It reminds us of our power, of our autonomy, that we're creators, that we're not reactionary beings up to the whims of the world around us, right? But I'd like to update that metaphor just a bit. Instead of us being the author, I like to think that we're more like the publisher of the book, of the story of our lives. Because a mistake that you can make when you're manifesting is thinking that you have the story all figured out. And when we see ourselves as the author, that's when we can fall into the traps that I've already shared before. No, we're more like the publisher of the story of our lives. We greenlight the outline And then the universe writes it. The universe is the author, plot twists and all, right? And we might fund the story. We make edits. We contribute to it. We read it. We're there taking action every step of the way. And just like a good publisher, you have to believe and you have to trust in your author. You have to have a stake in the game, but that doesn't mean you always write it. I mean, good stories aren't predictable anyways, and Lord knows if we wrote down our own stories, we would add no conflict, no twists. It'd be so very positive and so very boring. So it becomes this catch-22. You have to hold your intention and then let it go. Greenlight the book, but let the universe write it. Let the universe surprise and delight you. So if that's the case, one of my favorite mantras that I love to repeat is, my story is already written. Now I just get to read it. It's almost like one of those invisible ink pens that you can reveal by black light. I like to think of inspired action as the black light that reveals the manifestation, the story. And we just sort of go along for the ride of it. We enjoy it. Instead of making things happen, we allow things to happen because you don't ever know the ending. It's crazy to think now that all those 6 years of applying to Big Brother were part of the story of me actually getting on Big Brother. And I think one of the only reasons that I really truly kept that belief in myself and kept going was 1, that I wanted it so bad. And 2, I had these incredibly visceral, really real dreams that I was on Big Brother, that it was just my belief was so strong in it. So you have to remember, you don't know the ending. And that's a good thing. So I just want to thank you, travelers, for joining us here today on this journey towards destination manifestation. I hope these lessons from the trenches were helpful for you and allowed you to see your journey and your manifestations in an entirely new light. So take these lessons as you move forward, live them fully, and please let them shave years off your path. Time's relative anyways. Speed it up. Why not? So if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to this podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and you've learned something interesting about trusting and allowing the universe to do its thing, then you can learn more by sharing this podcast with your friends and family. I would say there is literally nothing better than when a good friend suggests a timely podcast. Do you guys have those kind of friends in your life? I have one friend, shout out to my friend Nicole, who every time we talk, I feel like I'll tell her like what's going on in my life and she'll be like, oh, you need to listen to this podcast. And she'll send me the episode. And then it's like, it's like the perfect thing that I needed in that moment. And I'm like, how do you know this? I feel like she's just like a wealth of knowledge. And some of those episodes have literally changed my life, changed my perspective. The closest I've ever gotten to getting a tattoo was based on a podcast episode she recommended to me, which I thought was really funny. She knows me. She knows her podcast. So be that person for your good friends. I know you could probably think of somebody right now who could benefit from the messages in this episode or other episodes here on the show. So if you feel called to share, reach out to your people. Also, I think I've shared this with you guys before. Every few months, I like to sift through the reviews that you guys have left for the show and highlight one very special destination manifestation traveler to feature. And this month, it's Kel's Lord. And she says, to put it simply, this podcast truly changed my life. I've been on a spiritual and personal growth journey since 2018 and have learned a lot throughout my time. Recently, a few months ago, I was let go from my job, which in hindsight has been the biggest blessing. Just side note, let me just chime in here for a second, okay? See, Kelsey, you let the universe do its thing. That's what I'm talking about in this episode, right? Okay, I'll stop chiming in. All right, back to her. She says, it afforded me the time to focus on who I really am, what I really want, and how I can get there. I've done a lot of personal reflection, and I'm a natural deep thinker / problem solver, always coming up with ways to move forward. But for whatever reason, things just weren't aligning as easily as they used to. I made an earnest plea to the universe to guide me and help me get past this block, and it led me to Brittany. I thank God every single day for her and all that she has helped me through with this podcast. I only found this podcast 1 week ago and feel like a brand new person. Oh, I know that sounds kind of crazy, LOL, but it is the truth. So thank you, Brittany, and thank you, universe. Oh, thank Thank you, Kelsey. I thank the universe for you. And I thank the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. I thank this beautiful universal intelligence for bringing anyone who is listening right now into this work, because you're not crazy. It is life-changing. And I'm so thankful to be able to share it with you all. All music for this podcast is by A Cubed. And remember, give up the reins. At the very least, you'll feel lighter for it. And that new lightness that you create will help your manifestation swoop on in. Catch you next time.